It's time for the 1430 Connection on 1430 WNAV and 99.9 FM, spotlighting news, newsmakers, and important community issues. Now, with this week's edition of the 1430 Connection, here is WNAV news anchor Donna Cole.
Welcome to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole. In the studio with me today, I welcome the Annapolis new Chief of Police, Ed Jackson. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
All right, brand new to Annapolis. And what do you think so far?
It's very interesting, very enjoyable. The people are nice. It's a very diverse town.
It is a very diverse town.
Very diverse town. I've met a lot of people from all walks of life. I'm going to enjoy it. It's going to be a challenge, but it's going to be very interesting.
Now, as I gave you some indication that I would be asking a weird question that's going to put you off a little bit because it's how I get to know people. So here it is, your favorite book, your favorite movie, and your favorite song.
My favorite book, probably The Tale of Two Cities, Dickens' Tale of Two Cities.
Speaking of diversity in a town, huh?
Exactly, Tale of Two Cities. Where I came from, it was a Tale of Two Cities.
Baltimore.
I'm from Baltimore
Yeah.
City, and it was a Tale of Two Cities.
Right.
On a whole lot of levels. My favorite movie, oh my goodness. My favorite movie is probably, I don't know, that's a tough one. I like so many movies. Oh my Lord.
Is it a cop movie?
No, it's not a cop movie. I'm a big Cary Grant fan,
Okay.
and so I like the 1950s movies. I was born in the late 1950s. I'm trying to think of the name of the movie, but Meet Me. The movie is centered in New York, and he falls in love with a young lady. They're supposed to meet at the top of the tower, and she gets in an accident.
Oh, right. Well, there was a remake of that, wasn't there?
Yes, a remake of that. Yeah, I think Megan. I think you know the movie.
Yes,
that I'm
I do.
referring
With
to.
Meg Ryan and did the
Ryan,
yes, did the remake.
Yes, and so it's probably one of my favorite movies for a lot of reasons.
Song.
My favorite song. I'm a big Whitney Houston fan, so any Whitney Houston song, and I like a diverse. I like country. I like rock. I like R&B. I don't know. My favorite song would probably be The Temptations' My Girl.
Okay, it's a good one. And you'll hear it a lot on the station, too.
Oh, okay.
Your fondness towards movies from the 1950s and your taste in music, and it leads you, for those that have not seen your style yet, your sense of style, you do have a unique sense of style.
Oh, thank you.
Tell me about that.
Oh, I love clothes.
Uh-huh.
I grew up poor, and I said if I ever made it in life, whatever that means, that I would dress the way I wanted to and have a sense of style.
Well, you're Chief of Police here in Annapolis, so I think that you've made it in life, yeah?
Yes, I think I have. Thank you. I'm very grateful, very blessed.
Was this a surprise to you?
It was. My background, I've been in law enforcement. I first came into law enforcement in 1982. I originally got into law enforcement as a career choice, but it was more complicated than that. I had student loans I had to pay for in college, and that was a way of forgiving my loans and helping me out financially. So I joined the police department in 1982, the Baltimore City Police Department, as a way to serve, but also as a way to be honest, to pay off my student loans.
Right.
And I ended up staying for over 20 years. I just fell in love with the profession. I was in academics for 14 years.
I saw that, too.
Upon my retirement, I taught sociology and criminal justice at Baltimore City Community College. And I say that to lay the foundation. I never thought I would come back into law enforcement, but I was the Inspector General in Baltimore City for a year, and I realized how much I missed it, and I thought that I still had a lot to offer. So never in my wildest dreams did I believe I would have the opportunity in Annapolis, but I'm so grateful. It's a good city.
You're a lifelong student. You like learning. You like being part of the academia.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And from my family, I come from a family. My father, he had no formal education. You know, he was a man of his times. Born during the Jim Crow era. In the 1930s, and I think he may have made it to the 8th grade. So it's always been my dream to go to college, and I didn't know, as a young man, I didn't know what I was going to study, but I just knew I wanted to get higher education. And my parents, particularly my mom, encouraged me to do that. Me and my siblings to do that.
Is that part of what you're going to be striving for with, recruiting? Recruiting has gotten tough in law enforcement. I don't think that's a surprise to you, right?
No, it's gotten very tough, with the series of events in custody deaths around the country, not only in Baltimore with Freddie Gray, but Gardner in New York and, so many of them, Brown in
Right.
Kansas. And so, and there's a bit of a revolution in American policing. The public's demanding more from officers. They don't want them as enforcers. They want them as problem solvers, and only enforcement is the last result. So
Right.
we're seeing a revolution, in my view, unlike we've seen since the 1960s during the Vietnam War protest.
But I think education might be part of helping that forward. So, knowing what your budget is now, and knowing that there are all sorts of officers out there that would like to probably have higher education, the opportunities. How are you going to make that? Is that something that is part of your mod?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And it's real simple, absolutely. And I believe the best way to achieve that is not through policy, it's to model it. Be the example you want to see.
And you're a PhD candidate right now,
I'm a
right?
PhD candidate, yes, ma'am. I was working on my PhD, which I intend to finish. I was in chapter 3 of my dissertation, and I was doing a quantitative correlational study on the impact of absentee fathers in the lives of their children as relates to crime, delinquency, and antisocial behavior. So I wanted to show through the research that there are a lot of social problems that occur when men are not active in the lives of their children. And my participants are both boys and girls, and it affects them in different ways.
Right. All right, we're going to take a short break. We'll be right back with Annapolis Chief of Police Ed Jackson. Welcome back to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole. In the studio with me is Annapolis new Chief of Police Ed Jackson. We remembered the movie. Actually, we had some help. We all have smartphones, and it is
An affair to remember.
Okay, let's go back to Baltimore for a minute. Were you okay with the findings of the Independent Review Board on Detective Sean Suter?
Yes, I was, for a lot of reasons. As tragic as that incident was, anytime police officers lose their lives in the line of duty, I think it's a very tragic event, and it kind of takes something away from the community. But overall, the findings of the Independent Review Board, I tend to agree. There was no evidence to suggest another suspect. I don't know if there was another suspect, but there was no physical evidence to suggest that there was another suspect.
All right. In America right now, which you have more than likely noticed, as most of us have, we don't seem to have the same level of trust or confidence or patronage in some of the big institutions that we once had, that you and I once had when we grew up. The schools, places of worship, and police department. Those are the three biggies that really form.
Exactly.
How do you battle that?
Well, I tell everybody, and this has been my mission, I learned social control theory in graduate school. And what social control theory asserts, and I'm seeing it right here in America through my lenses right now, is that there's 6 very important institutions of social control in America. The most important ones are the family, institution of family, the institution of education, that's K through 12, and secondary education, post-secondary education, and faith-based institutions, and I mean that in a broad sense. Most faiths teach you how to subscribe to the dominant values of society, to treat people like you want to be treated, to live together in harmony. And when those 3 institutions fail in a community, or are irrelevant, or they're ineffective,
right,
then the other 3 institutions generally
come into play more.
That's police, courts, and corrections. So we need more family, faith-based, and education, and less police, courts, and corrections.
What will you be doing in Annapolis to try to bridge those gaps?
I'm going to promote that. Don't get me wrong. I love the institution of policing. We need policing, but we should be guardians of the community, not warriors in it. And so if we can find a way to strengthen the community, engage our schools, and encourage our faith-based partners to be more involved, then we can do what I believe policing was meant to do, and that's maintain social control through guardianship, not being warriors.
With all the studying of this, have you seen it might be more difficult in cities, which most of cities are right now in the United States, that have this diversity in racial components and in age. And Annapolis, it doesn't have one poster child, which is the beauty of any city, that we are so diverse.
Yeah, I think it starts at the highest levels of government. I think it starts in Washington, D.C. I think our president has to accept responsibility for the narrative.
And do you think our president is?
No, I don't. I don't think that he's done enough. Now, I would agree that he's not responsible for mass shootings. He didn't do it, but he's the president. And a lot of times that office carries a lot of power and a lot of influence. And unfortunately, there's so many people out there who are misguided, and they look to leadership to help them in their thinking and their decision.
To be the moral compass.
To be the moral compass, exactly. So when you have this kind of monolithic, this kind of myopic view of society and think that one group is superior over another, then it promotes it, it brings people out. And then another elephant in the room, really, and that we need to talk about in this country is our economic system. We have too many cities where there's high concentrations of poverty, right, and it has a domino effect. When poverty leads to lack of access leads to lack of exposure. Lack of exposure leads to one's inability to appreciate differences and culture. And so we have to do something about poverty. Even when you're talking about mass shootings, a lot of times people feel, sociologists call it anomie. And anomie is hopelessness, when a person feels detached from society and doesn't feel that they have a relevant place in it. That's the formula to get people to think about doing something so they can be recognized. And unfortunately, with the availability of handguns, we've seen this influx of mass shootings in America. I mean, when you really think about it, in the last 7 years, it's staggering. Everything from Sandy Hook to the shooting in Vegas and so forth and so on. I mean, it makes me really sad when I think about the number of mass shootings.
I think it makes all of us sad. Are you a parent?
Oh, yes, I have two adult sons, and they're in their 30s now, mid-30s and early 30s, and I still worry about them as a parent. I still worry about them. My oldest son resides in Manhattan, in New York City, and my youngest son is still here in Maryland.
So what do you see as the fix for this issue, the mass shootings?
Yeah, we have to have an honest debate, and that starts in Washington, and it has to trickle down to our communities. First of all, we have to respect, and even if we don't agree, we have to respect diversity. We live at a time now where people vilify you for thinking differently. But the beauty of America has always been its ability to attract people from all types of cultures, all ethnicities, all walks of life. But somehow we have a small group of people that think that they set the standard for everybody, and that has to change. I would pray that we don't go back to the days where everything is centered around the white male, and everybody has to conform to white male standards. And that's been at the core of a lot of problems in America. And for all the white males listening, it's far more profound than that. I'm not blaming every white male for America's problems. I want to just add that. What I am saying is that we have to include everybody and appreciate differences and not center our whole way of thinking around just one group. It's dangerous. It's dangerous if you do it for black males or any one specific group. Our power and our beauty has been in our diversity.
Do you have political aspirations?
Not at the moment, no. I'm just so happy to be the chief of police.
I get it. But have you thought about it?
Not really.
Okay.
I tell you what I'll share with you in my deepest recesses. I would love to really use this platform that's been so graciously given to me to influence some political views. In other words, I want people to see Annapolis Police Department, forever long my tenure is, as a department that really gets it in terms of inclusion, really gets it in terms of respecting individual rights, really gets it when it comes to the Constitution. I want disciplined men and women who understand, can go into communities and do what they're sworn to do, and that's to protect and serve, but also to be able to work with the community. And if I can influence politicians, and if I can influence, if my name is mentioned in conversations about transformative leadership, boy, what an honor that would be, what a capstone that would be in my long career.
And to jump back to the previous conversation before politics, would you like to see a change in gun laws?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, they say guns don't kill, people kill, and I agree with that. But the problem is that people pull the triggers. Guns are weapons of destruction. There's nothing that a gun is meant to do. Who should
have AR-15s?
I'll go on the record without the risk of getting myself in trouble, but I think those weapons should be reserved for responsible men and women who serve in the military or some type of militia, and people who have been properly vetted to make sure they don't suffer from mental illness or engage in hate groups. I'll go on the record to say those people have no business with weapons, because the only thing that's going to happen, nothing's good going to happen out of that. We're going to have another El Paso and so forth and so on. So, and then even mental illness. That's another thing that we need to talk about in this country, guns and mental illness.
Well, let's take a break and come back and talk more about that. This is Donna Cole on the 1430 Connection. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the 1430 Connection. I'm Donna Cole. In the studio with me is Ed Jackson. He's our new chief of police here in the city of Annapolis. Mental health is a big issue. How do you try to fix this? I mean, it very much relates to your work, even though you're not a psychiatrist or a psychologist.
Absolutely. And you're right. I think that it's easier. We have to have a driver's license to drive a car.
We do.
I mean, and state's real big on that. Get caught operating the vehicle without a driver's license, and there's consequences. But I find it interesting that it's so easy, the availability of guns. Maryland does a lot better than a lot of states, but you can, if you can't get it in Maryland, there's far too many places that you can go and get a gun fairly easily, or weapons of mass destruction very easily. And so if we require our citizens to have a driver's license and we enforce the driving laws very strictly, then it confuses me as a criminal justice professional that we don't have tighter laws nationally when it comes to the purchase and sale of handguns. You can go to flea markets, you can go some interesting places and get guns. That's the problem with Baltimore City, availability of guns in urban America, and not only Baltimore, but cities like Baltimore. Right. And it makes me sad that we only have a political response. We need not only a political response, but we need a community response, and we need our leaders to really facilitate that. And what I mean by a political response,
go ahead.
I was just telling my son, I said there's a political response to criminal justice, and there's a community response. A political response says we're going to act new laws. We name laws after victims, but if we don't have the bandwidth or the ability, law enforcement, or the resources to enforce the law, it's just a law in the books.
But it didn't happen during the last administration or the one before that or the one before that. It didn't happen in this administration. We're deadlocked, maybe because of NRA, maybe not because of, what's...
I have my own theory. I think that America has to get past this fascination with weapons. I think even nice people have a fascination with weapons. I personally know people who are law-abiding citizens, but they just have this fascination with weapons. And I remember as a young college student, this was back in the 80s, I did an informal research paper, and I should have really cultivated that more. But you can trace the influx of guns during the Civil Rights era in America and Baltimore. And people bought weapons out of fear. When we had the riots after the assassination of Dr. King. Yeah. And we even predated Dr. King on November 22nd, 1963, when President Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. It seems like, if you look back historically, America's had this fascination with weapons.
Well, from day one. Guarding their livestock and guarding the ranches.
America, that's right, exactly.
The West.
That's right, exactly. Yeah. You're right. During Manifest Destiny and during the westward expansion, the the cowboy era, if you will.
And guarding against the English. The British were coming, right?
Exactly.
So it goes
It does. It goes back to, I agree with you, it goes back to colonial days, really. But I guess my point being, these high-power weapons, in modern times, it seems like 1963 seems like that was the point of departure for the violence as we know it now, actual violence. When they killed the president, I mean, Lincoln was assassinated by handgun, McKinley, but it seems like the Kennedy assassination, for some reason, just caused this influx of guns in American cities, and then Dr. King only exacerbated it during the riots.
What are you going to do to make sure that we're protected from it happening here in Annapolis again?
And I was ready to say, we're just still mourning the loss of what happened.
And two people in this room, one who's silent and me who's here, both worked with the Capitol and lost friends, and we all lost friends. Amy too.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. And we just have to be vigilant. One of my roles as a police executive, I have to be the voice, the expert, and my philosophy has to align with the mayor's philosophy, Mayor Buckley's philosophy, and the council's philosophy. And I think I share their views in that we have to be vigilant and advocate for stricter handgun laws. I thought that the mayor wrote a very interesting, I enjoyed reading it Sunday in the Gazette. He was paying homage to all the victims who were killed over the weekend, and he talked about the need for Washington to really take this gun debate seriously. And I wholeheartedly agree with Mayor Buckley that we have to have a meaningful discussion, not just rhetoric, not persuasive language, but real action plan to address it. So I'm just going to advocate, keep pushing,
keep up the good fight.
Keep up the good fight. Yeah, make sure my officers are visible. Take every opportunity strategically away from individuals who may be using and take information seriously. There's a lot of red flags. I'm sorry, I don't mean to.
No worries.
But if you look at most of those events, there were red flags, and so I would encourage the public, that like they say, the mantra for Homeland Security. If it looks suspicious, say something. If you see something, say something.
911 is always available, right?
Exactly. I was watching NBC News this morning to Today's Show, and they talked about the suspect, I think, in the El Paso shooting, where there were so many red flags. Everything from his girlfriend, when they went out on their first date, he took her to the gun range, to his fascination with, mass killings. And, when we see things, a lot of times we just shrug it off as being eccentric.
That's odd.
That's odd, yes. But we have to encourage our citizens to tell somebody in authority.
One last question. You're going to have to come back because, that's part of your job to come back and see us at WNAV.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if it says that in your contract, but we can tell you that.
I'm looking forward to it. Yes, ma'am.
One last question. With cold cases, I know in many times, I also know in Annapolis, there are suspects that have been identified, but there's not enough evidence to convict. How do you get beyond that issue? What, is it part of more cameras? Is it?
Oh, that helps, sadly, but it's a necessary tool that we have to use to aid law enforcement. And you're right. I'm learning already that a lot of the cold cases, there's 16 of them. Some of them we know who did it, but we have to prove it. And unfortunately, we live in a democracy, and it's not enough to know who did it. We have to pass it on to a prosecutor. And if a prosecutor tells us that based on the evidence, we can't move forward with the case to secure a conviction, then we have to reconcile that we took it as far as we can. But I firmly believe, and I've investigated murders in my previous career, that it's never over. And so what I like to do, I told my staff yesterday, we need to visit the families on the anniversary of their loved one's death. It's once a year, to let them know that we haven't forgotten them, number one. Number two, to keep asking questions, anything else that you've heard, seen, anything.
And to remind neighbors if you saw something.
That's right, exactly.
Say something, because you know who did it, but you can't pin it on them.
Exactly, and you're exactly right. And I know cases in many instances, and this is where we can offer citizens hope, where it seems like it's unprosecutable, and that all investigative leads have been exhausted, and then voila, the right interview and the right follow-up sometimes develops
Does it?
leads, and I know it's unthinkable to have to lose a loved one to violence, and I think that as part of customer service in the Annapolis Police Department, it doesn't hurt my detectives to go out once a year and say, look, we still haven't forgot your loved one, and if it's anything, and just call us, and a lot of times that helps people with dealing with the trauma.
Chief, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
And I think it's so cool you walked in with a Dunkin' Donuts. Did you have a donut? It's so very cop-like.
Yeah, it's so stereotypical, isn't it?
It really is.
But I do enjoy my Dunkin' Donuts.
We'll talk to you again soon. This is Donna Cole on the 1430 Connection. We will see you next week.